So welcome back to Early Modern Philosophy. I'm Andy. I'm a philosophy lecturer, and today, very briefly, I want to talk to you about the three proofs for the existence of God that Descartes gives us. And the first of them is a very old proof. It comes from the Middle Ages, from Anselm, from Canterbury, and this is the ontological proof for the existence of God. The ontological proof is an a priori proof. It means that is a proof of God that can be made without any experience. I don't need to look at the universe. I don't need to have any experience. I don't need to look at any facts. It is just a proof that God exists that follows directly from the definition of God. And the opposite of a priori, obviously, is a posteriori, which are proofs which are based on some observation of some empirical data on seeing the world and using that as the basis of the proof. Now, the ontological proof goes like this. God is perfect, this we know by the definition. God has all the perfections. God cannot have any lack of anything. And if God did not exist, then he would be lacking something. He would be lacking existence. And an existing God would always be better than a non-existing God, because in addition to having all these perfect qualities of God, he would also have existence. And since, having existence is better than not having existence, an existing God is better than a not existing God. And therefore, since God is best, is most perfect, God must exist. So this is the idea of this proof. Of course, this is not a very strong proof, right? It was already in the Middle Ages criticized by another monk who said that in this way we could prove that a perfect island, for example, exists, because a perfect island, by definition, if it's perfect, it must have all the perfections, including existence, and therefore it must exist. In the same way, a perfect husband must exist, a perfect car must exist, all perfect things must exist, because otherwise there would be lacking existence. Now, this counter-argument is also not particularly good, because then you could retreat to the position that this does not apply to islands, it does not apply to husbands and cars, it applies only to God, because only God is perfect in every possible way, right? While an island or a car is perhaps perfect instrumentally for a particular purpose, and then there can be different things can be perfect for different purposes. So there is some discussion to be made there, whether this argument about the perfect island is really the perfect argument to criticize the ontological proof. But Immanuel Kant criticized it in a more basic way. Immanuel Kant said, the famous German philosopher of the Enlightenment, he said that existence is not a quality at all, is not a property of something. I can imagine something having particular properties. I can imagine, my jacket having particular properties, is made of a particular material. It has this, attractive color, and it has lots of pockets, which is primarily why I'm wearing it. And now if I look at all these properties, they all change the jacket in some way. So if it did not have these pockets, then it would not be the same jacket. It would be a different jacket. The same is not true of existence. If the jacket existed, or if it does not exist, if it just existed in my imagination, it would be the same jacket. The properties of the jacket would not actually change. So existence is not a property like other properties, and in this way, taking it away from something or giving it to something does not make it more perfect, because actually the properties of the things don't change when they exist or when they don't exist. I'm not sure that this argument presented like this is really convincing, because then people always tend to argue $100 that exist in my pocket are surely better than $100 that will not exist in my pocket. Then you have, different meanings of better. Is it better for me? Is it better for the $100? Things become a little confusing. I think a more clear illustration of this is to say, imagine you have an ancient statue, one of these ancient Greek statues that is perfect in any way. It's beautiful. It shows the human body in all its perfection, is a perfect work of art. And now imagine in your imagination you have this perfect statue. And now think of a statue that really exists in front of you. Let's say it's here in this garden behind me somewhere stands this statue, which has been standing around for 2,000 years, and therefore it's pretty worn down. Moss is growing all over it. The nose is missing. One arm is missing. And you can still guess that this once was a beautiful statue, but now it's not anymore, right? The statue is not really anymore a beautiful statue. It's not a perfect statue in any way with all the missing limbs and so on. And now you can ask, is the existing statue really more perfect than the statue in my imagination just because it exists? So does the existence, compensate for any of the damages of the statue, for any of the drawbacks of the statue? Or is the existence, is it doing anything to make the statue better? And I think that in this example, you can see it more clearly that the existence actually does not do anything to make the statue better, right? In terms of perfection, the statue in my mind is a lot better than the real statue. And the fact that the real statue exists is not really improving it in any way. I could, imagine it, I could paint it in its full perfection. I could perhaps try to remake it, and then it would be a great statue, but my imagination is clearly better than the real statue in this case. So this is the first proof that Descartes gives. It, as I said, it was a traditional, very convincing proof, you can say, until Kant arrived and criticized it even more convincingly. The second proof that Descartes gives is one from the existence of the concept of God. Descartes says, I can imagine God clearly in my mind. I can imagine God being all perfect and all powerful and so on. As I can imagine, this table, this chair, this tree, everything around me here, I can imagine all these things, and I can imagine them only because I've seen them first. I've had an experience of them. So when I imagine a chair, it can only be done because I've seen a chair before. So this allows me to imagine a chair. And my imagination is always, my idea that the chair in my mind is always less good than the real chair. In the same way, like a painting is always less perfect than the object that it depicts. So if I paint a chair, the painted chair is less perfect as a chair than the chair itself. I can sit on the chair, but I cannot sit on the painting. The chair is three-dimensional. The painting is two-dimensional. The chair has a lot more detail. I can take a microscope to the chair and see its inner structure. I can cut it apart. I cannot do that with a painting. I can see the inner structure of the painting, but not of the painted chair. So, in a sense, our mental representations of things are always less detailed, less real than the real things. But the real things are what is the source for a mental representation, what gives them reality. And so now if I imagine God, the argument goes by analogy, there must be something that really has all these properties that I am imagining when I talk about God. I talk about a being that's all powerful and all good and all knowing. And how can my mind make this up? It cannot make it up as, little as I can make up a chair out of nowhere. I need to have seen a chair. I need to have experienced a chair. Or, even if I make it up, the real chair somewhere must give me some inspiration. And my mind cannot make up, perhaps my mind can make up a chair, but my mind cannot make up something that's endless, that has infinite power, that has infinite knowledge, because my mind does not contain infinite power and infinite knowledge. My mind is finite, right? My mind is small. And with this small mind, how can I imagine this infinite thing? I cannot. My mind would not be able to make this up. So there must be something that really has these properties and that puts this idea into my mind. And this must be the real God. And this is why God exists, because I have this image in my mind of God. And this is his second argument, the painter argument, if you want. I make a painting of something, and since the painting is a lesser quality thing than the real thing must exist as the template, as the blueprint for my painting, and in the same way God must exist as my blueprint of the idea of God that is in my mind. Now the third argument, again, is a very traditional argument. This is the argument from causal change, a causal argument. You can say that everything in the world has a cause, and part of it is also in the argument we just talked about, that my mental images also must have a cause outside of them. But even in the outside world, if I stay with the outside world, everything has a cause that makes it exist, or every event has a cause that causes this event. If a ball rolls, somebody must have pushed it. If a chair is there, somebody must have constructed it, and so on. And then somebody made the person who constructed the chair. And so we have these endless chains of cause and effect that go back and back and back, and every event in the world has another cause. And so this would be endless, but we have the additional axiom or the additional assumption that there cannot be an endless chain, so there must be a first thing, a first mover, as Aristotle called it, or a first cause, as Descartes calls it. And this first cause, what can it be? It must be God. And so this is the last argument, right? We have these causal chains. We know that everything must have a cause. And what is the cause, the original cause, since the chain of causes cannot be endless, must be God. Now, if you think about it, this argument again is not particularly good, is not a very strong argument, because if you look at it in detail, you see that this argument contains a contradiction, right? It has at the beginning the assumption that everything must have a cause, but then the solution of this riddle is that the chain of causes cannot go on forever, and therefore I have God, and now suddenly God violates this original assumption that everything must have a cause. Now God does not have a cause, which is what makes him God. And in this way, I am actually contradicting my premise, right? The whole premise of the argument was that everything must have a cause, but now my solution is that God does not have a cause. And why is this now suddenly an exception to the rule that everything must have a cause? So you see that again, this is not a particularly strong argument. It's not a good argument. It contradicts itself. It also has another problem. If you think about it, what does the argument actually say? Does it prove that there exists a God in the sense that we like to imagine a Christian God? And the answer is probably no, right? Because we imagine a Christian God as a person, right? It has some personality characteristics. God can, be merciful, he can be good, he can be bad, he can be take revenge and so on, can be vengeful, right? So you have all these personality properties of God. But what these causal arguments prove is just that there must be a first cause. And so, for example, Big Bang, the explosion at the beginning of the universe, the singularity that explodes and creates the universe, this would fulfill the criteria for a first cause. I don't need God, right, in this case. I don't need a personal God. I just need a thing that can be an abstract first cause for the existence of everything else. And this is not necessarily a Christian God. It's just a first cause. So there is no reason to assume that the singularity at the beginning of the universe was all-powerful, all-knowing, and so on. But I want God to be these things. So actually my causal argument does not prove the existence of a God with the typical properties of a Christian God. It just proves the existence of a first cause, even if it was a good argument, which it is not. So this is it. These are the three proofs that Descartes gives for the existence of God in the Meditations. I hope that this made it a little more clear, and I will see you in the next lecture about early modern philosophy. Thank you, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.